Thank you, even though you haven't heard me speak yet. I'm going to trip over this wire, by the way. The good news is my talks always go better when people have been drinking, so that's good. Oh, that's what it is, right. Okay. So, yes, I'm going to talk about this topic, which I actually forgotten I said was the topic when I started putting it together, so we'll see where this goes. But this is the first slightly awkward bit where I have to kind of prove that I've got the credentials to talk to you. So Simone and Steph, you know who they are. They've got all the creds in the world. I haven't done that yet, so I will promise to do that in 60 seconds or less. It will feel like a pitch. Here we go. So one of my proudest moments is after 12 years, or during the 12 years that I built and ran a big user-centered design agency that at least one or two people in this room have worked for, we were rated as clear leaders in Europe, so that was nice. So that's part of my user-centered design or human-centered design credentials. What I now do is I'm a founding partner of a company called Fluxx. We do, for want of a better phrase, product and service innovation, but largely we work with big companies, helping them to do new things, usually digital, but not always. But digital is always important in that, and as you can see, it's for quite a variety of companies, ranging from the Royal Opera House to magazine companies to Argos. And talking of Argos, so we get given challenges like this. So Argos said, given that we've made this massive investment in technology, anyone seen these sort of funky iPad things they have in shops now? Yeah, you like them or not? No? Can't use them. Not my fault, not responsible. You'll hear me say that a lot in this talk, actually. But the screen keeps going on and off, but that's fine. We'll just cope with that. So they said, look, get to know our colleagues and our customers and tell us what the opportunities are for kind of creating new products or new services for them. So we do stuff like that. And that involved me working in 10 different Argos shops up and down the country. I'll just let you carry on, Stuart. You just keep going.
I'll just stand.
That's all right.
In case it breaks.
That's all right. It looks like it is going to break, but anyway. So we also do news. We help people understand new and different ways of working, particularly using kind of lean methods. So this is the digital service from Parliament, who are newly formed, and as you can see, they're sort of on and off a little bit. I'll think of some better jokes. No, you go for it.
I'll plug you in by VGA. Carry on talking.
That's all right.
Yeah.
You'll need to do a bit of funnies with the audio.
Yeah.
So this talk's going to last longer than anticipated as well. But we do stuff with them like essentially getting them to work in new ways, much more collaboratively. So the digital function there, which is full of people like you and developers and designers, are kind of a little bit alien from the business, as we call it, which means MPs, their secretaries, the committees officers, all sorts of weird people, including some that wear funny trousers. I actually went to a meeting with someone wearing funny trousers, and that was part of their uniform. But
is that like galoshes? Like
no, well, they call them pantaloons, I think. But anyway, that's a bit bizarre. Okay, odds on the audio won't work, but never mind. We'll roll with it.
Yeah, right.
Right, hang on a sec. It's actually, this is probably the nicest bit of UI Microsoft have ever done.
It's still not working.
It will do in a second. Boom. Okay, there we go. So we do stuff like that as well. Right, this is now lasting longer than 60 seconds, and I've lost my clicker. Right, here we go. So it keeps, it's still going. All right, we're good. Okay, this is probably now my fault officially.
Sorry, Paul.
No. Let's try that. Oh, I know what it was. It's that thing on the keyboard. Let's try that and see where we get to. Right, that was definitely longer than 60 seconds, wasn't it? But never mind. Right, okay. Hopefully that will disappear as well, but I'm not going to bother with it. I think the world is full of crazy ideas. You're looking at on screen the Exa shovel, which is a shovel with a hole in it, specifically designed that you get a workout while not digging very much earth. My other favourite one is the self-cooling chopsticks for noodles, which is basically a pair of chopsticks with a fan on it. This is a really weird one. It's actually a snowstorm mask developed in like the 1930s, but anyway, in New York. My favourite one probably is for those that don't like your cups being stolen in the office. So it's Lock Up Your Cups is the title, and it's a cup with basically a removable plug. So you take the plug out and who would use your mug, right? My last one here is the baby butt fan, which is for drying babies' butts to avoid nappy rash. Okay, everyone agree they're fairly crazy ideas, right? Now, I want to do a little bit of role play. Anyone fancy themselves as a bit of a kind of marketing person or brand person? Oh, yeah, at least one up there. Okay, we're going to role play, just you and I. Yeah, that's it, right. Okay, oh, which one? Okay, well, either of you. Okay, let's imagine that we are off to promote the Interaction Lab. That didn't work. at some massive graduate fair in Excel, right? It's all right. It's not going to be that interactive. Okay, so we're going to Excel. There's a huge graduate fair on. We've got a little tiny stand because that's all the university can afford, right? Right at the back of the hall, and we're brainstorming how we're going to get people to our stand, right? That's the scenario. Got that? Yes. Say yes, Paul.
Yes, Paul.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so you're going to say to me something like, why don't we stand at the front and hand out some flyers?
Why don't we stand at the front and hand out some flyers?
Flyers, brilliant. You know what? You've given me an amazing idea. Why don't we get some flies and we'll tie little tiny leaflets to their legs, like with nylon or something like that, and then we'll release them all into the Excel Centre, and they're going to fly over, they're going to land on people, when they'll look at it and go, oh, I'm going to go and visit the Interaction Lab stand at the back. And you would say to me,
that's an amazing idea.
no, you wouldn't!
No, that's a shit idea. No, bad idea.
You would not
Bad
say
Paul.
that!
Bad Paul.
Okay, it's a ridiculous idea.
Ridiculous
and you
idea,
know it.
Paul. You're
Thank
fired.
You. And then I would prove you wrong by showing you this. So this is the Frankfurt Book Fair, which we obviously mastermind the marketing campaign for. And somebody's actually done this, right? Now, I do not know what I think about the ethics of this, or even the hygiene of this, necessarily, but people seem to be all right with it. And they managed to get over the kind of core problem that I imagine, which is like, how do you actually make it attach in the first place? And, you know, how will people respond to it, right? So suddenly, my ridiculous idea suddenly turned into a really amazing idea, right? Because I've got a bit of evidence to back up that it'll be all right. Okay, now the world is full of crazy ideas that someone's turned into a half-decent idea, right? So who would have thought that a company that does high-tech high school yearbooks launches a satellite? Unfortunately, this satellite did blow up on the launch pad the other week, but anyway, Facebook are launching satellites. Who would have that would have been a crazy idea when it was first suggested. There's another well-known company that indexes data who wants to create a network of balloons. That's a bit lunatic. Who on earth would invite a speaker from that company to talk here? But yes, Google have got Project Loon, part of their kind of moonshots program, which is setting out to do exactly that, right? These are just crazy. I was going to say something rude, but I'll try not to. That is a car crashed in 1930-something. Now, at that point in time, had I said, I've got a brilliant idea to make car travel safer, we're going to strap people in, you would have looked at that and thought, I definitely don't want to be strapped into that, right? But, 30 years later, we start to get the technology right and some other kind of contributing factors. And nowadays, I think there's a... I can't remember the statistic. Can't say statistic. But, no, I can't actually remember it. But loads of people's lives are saved by seatbelts. There we go. That's all you need to know. That's what you would have thought in your head after I said the number. So there are two types of idea. There are crazy ideas, and there are crazy ideas somebody made good. Usually it's people like you in this room who are responsible for those things. Oh, I know why that keeps happening now. Right. It's my fault. There's a button on here that blanks the screen out. So anyway, no, it's all Stuart's fault, really. Did you say we weren't getting paid for this, by the way?
We got rid of that crap at the start.
Oh, well done. Did you say we weren't getting paid for this? Yeah, that's about right. Anyway, right. So, but I think we all, and who is studying in this room at the moment? Okay, who's working, and who's living a life of luxury on their parents' trust fund? Well done, thank you. Okay, good. All right, okay. So those of you in work probably recognise this more than those not yet quite got there into their brilliant jobs. But we're all brought crazy ideas every day from a variety of different directions, and often they come top down. An absolute classic is the CEO got a insert new technology here. In my day, it was iPad, but it could be got a new iWatch, could have been got a new something or other gadget, and therefore they want to now do something. Right? That's an absolute classic. The marketing director's niece, because she's a millennial, right, and so she said this is now really important, we've got to do this, that's the classic. Another company does this, usually it's bloody Amazon or bloody Google, right, and therefore so should we, right, that's pretty typical. The kind of commercial angle, now this is a Ryanair thing, so when Ryanair said, we want to charge people for using the toilets. That basically means they've done the numbers and it will make loads of money. So there's ideas that come from that direction. This has genuinely happened to me. Our CEO is level 57 on Call of Duty and ... and that actually led to quite an interesting project that involved Xbox controllers and three-dimensional environments that at least one person in this room knows about. Anyway, so it's true, right? So we're all brought crazy ideas every day. So what is the role of the HCI designer when handed one of these things? And typically it's to make sure it's actually founded in insight, that something can relate it back to a user need, that, yeah, maybe it's sort of headed in the right direction. It's to put yourself in the mind of that user and see how you could therefore make it into a good idea, and then to design that execution and then test that execution with users to see if your design was right, and so on and so forth, loop, rinse, repeat, etc., etc. However, you're not asked to judge whether it's a good idea or not, right? Because it might be batshit crazy or it might be genius, right? And who are we to judge? Because it is a really very fine line between those two things, right? Here's a good example of an invention that was adjudged to both to be crazy and genius at the same time. Anyone care to have a guess at what this is? Sort of a weird box with what looks like a cassette tape stuck on the side. Oh, you're too good, you lot. That's the world's first digital camera, exactly. And the inventor's name was Steve Sasson. You knew that? I could see you mouthing it. He worked for Kodak at the time. You'd think that was a genius invention. This is what the Kodak board said about it. They said, that's cute, but don't tell anyone about it, because it'll ruin our business, right? Because their business was making film and all the chemicals and all the processing. So they thought it was a crazy idea. However, I think they got a bit crazy, because in 2012, one of their executives was quoted saying, I think film's coming back. And they launched products like this. This is the Kodak Advantix Preview. It's a digital camera, but inside it has a roll of film. So you take a digital photograph, you decide on the little screen on the back which one you want, and then you commit that image to film, and you go and get it processed. So it's great. So, I mean, that is a crazy idea, but anyway. So how can we shelve the crazy? How can we get rid of that? Because it's so time-consuming. Trying to work out whether something is good or not, or just lunacy, is a really time-consuming process. It takes time, it takes money. If you get it wrong, it costs an enormous amount of money. Now, you might say, let's introduce a process. So we could pass it around the organisation. We could run it by Bob and Cheryl and Ken and Pam and Steve and so on, and see how we get on. And largely, this kind of endless organisational consensus leads to a pretty random outcome, because if it was the CEO's idea in the first place, it's probably going to pass through, and if it wasn't, it might not, because everyone's a bit worried about it. So these are the things that we at Fluxx believe in. So first things first, if you want to find out if an idea is any good, start it, right? Stop talking about it and get on with trying to do it, and do it at pace. You have to develop empathy with your users and your potential audience, your market. So we say walk more than a mile in other people's shoes. We also say it ain't going to get done unless someone gets on and does it. So we say roll your sleeves up, ideas need doers. And then the other part, which is really about collaboration, which is you can't do this on your own. You need to work with a collective of diverse and extraordinary people. And then lastly, the one I'm going to talk about now is design with data. So design stuff that you know has actual value, not that your CEO or the marketing director's niece believe has value. So I'm going to talk about that last one. So I think the future of HCID is about helping businesses or owners of products make better decisions about the direction of those products. Okay, that's my contention. Anyone agree with that? Or disagree? Oh, I've got some thumbs up from Stuart. Hooray for Stuart. Because research, so there's a lovely pie chart. So these are the two responses. The people who say they're on their way, who are actually on their way, and those that are still at home, and also the vast majority are still at home. But people in research lie. I'm really sorry to those researchers, but you know they do, right? Unless you're asking them for specific facts about their life, if you ask them about opinions, they don't mean to lie. They're really well-intentioned. They tell you what they think they should say, or what they think you want to hear in some cases. I hope you're savvy enough to see through that. Sometimes they act as if the weight of the world is on their shoulder and the responsibility of the human race is down to them, and therefore they must answer in the correct way to influence the design of this product, right? As if there are actually some nodding heads, right? But research is where we get our ideas from, it's where we get our insight from, it's how we kind of assure ourselves that we're sort of going in the right direction. Let me tell you a story, though, of where that can be limiting, right? So this is a true story. It's a well-known financial institution whose colour is blue, but I won't name. And they were struggling with a bit of a thorny kind of problem. So they had a strategy that essentially said, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do. If we can dip into our customers' bank statements and look at the data there, we can analyse it, use it, work with it, and do some really cool stuff. Now, there were 187 ideas locked up behind that premise. So if that was okay, 187 things unlocked entirely, right? It's £100 million worth of potential business or more stuck behind that kind of one problem. The problem was that half the bank thought, you're right, this is brilliant. And the other half thought, no, our customers are going to go absolutely nuts because they'll call the Daily Mail. They hate bankers anyway at that time, because they did. And we'll be in a whole world of pain. So we kind of thought we have to bust through this in some way. So we created an experiment. And the experiment simply was a little bit of code inside online banking. It was done actually as a marketing campaign. It just sort of said, how would you like to compare yourself and your level of spend with people like you on a certain category of spending, right? Simple, okay? Like that idea or not? Silence. Excellent. So, when the bank put it through usability testing, passed that no problem. But the interesting thing and the challenging thing for us was only 24% of people said it was okay. The rest were either really angry about it, and some of them were absolutely raging. How dare you do this? You can't dip into my statement. Well, it's okay by me, but you know, I'm just thinking of other people, how they would respond, right? And some just didn't care, right? So with that kind of acceptance rating, we did what any responsible ethical company would do, which is we put it live anyway. Because the point was not to see what people thought of it, but what they actually did. So when we actually put it live in online banking, 10,000 people, 96% of them just went, yeah, I'm doing that, that's brilliant, and no one complained. Right? So that is a staggering turnover. So that really drawing attention to there's what people say they'll do, and what they actually don't. Now, you know that, but creating a kind of point where you can prove that definitively and get some data on how well or how badly actually this thing will go is really hard. So my contention is that future, helping make better decisions, is all down to one thing and one thing alone, that's the experiment, okay? So again, brilliant educational institution, you know all about experiments and scientific method. Here's one that we worked on. So if you like a bit of a bet, which I can sell that you responsible people don't, and you have a bit of a win, say on the Grand National that you do once a year, you have a bit of a win, you have now a balance in your online betting account, okay? Now, if you want to get at that money, it takes 3 days to get back to you. So what people typically do is they have a big win on Saturday on football or horses, and they withdraw it straight away because they think they might need it on Thursday or Friday, right? And that's fine. Now, that is a bit of a problem for any bookmaker because when somebody on a kind of whim says, I'll have a bit of a bet on that, they tend to go to the place where their balance is, right? So keeping hold of it is quite important. So they came up with this idea, and they've had this idea for 3 years, which is if we give our customers a card that when they have that money in their account, it's not a credit card, it's literally linked to that balance. So if they get a win, or £150, buy a round for everyone in the pub, right? And just use that card, comes straight out of their account. Okay, sounds okay, right? Now the problem with this is it could go one of 2 ways. Either people will go, that's really brilliant, I'll leave my money in my account, right? Because I know I can get it any time I want. I can take it out of an ATM, I can spend it in a pub, I can buy curry, I won't tell you what else people did with it, but we know. But on the flip side of that, the financial director's going, no, everyone's just going to take their money out straight away and we'll have no money on deposit, right? That's the worst thing that can happen. So this idea was stuck behind that kind of will they, won't they? Now they asked lots of customers and they went 50-50, right? Well, I'd do that, I wouldn't do that, I don't know. Useless. So we instead said, okay, right, let's take 20 customers, we will get 20 prepaid credit cards, and we will manage the systems that tops them up and kind of takes money off them and stuff. We will send them to 20 customers and just say, here is a new account access card or winnings card or whatever we called it. Use it as you see fit. This is what it does, right? So we shipped those to 20 customers, and this team on the right in Manila sat in front of 2 screens, one of which was the betting account balances and the other which was the credit card balances. And when someone had a win on their betting account, they'd top up the credit card by the same amount, And if they spent money on the credit card, they'd debit the betting account, right? So they just kept them in balance. So that saved roughly £3.5 million, because that's how much it would cost to do that whole project and do the integration, right? And we ran it for 3 months. So we just took 12 weeks, said, we'll see what happens. At the end of it, and I've taken all the meaningful data off this brilliant graph, so you have to believe me that this was the outcome that they wanted, right? We proved that the people's behaviours was exactly as we wanted them to be. And at the end of the trial, another really big test is to say to customers, can I have the card back, please? And they all said no, right? Which is another quite good test, right? So that's an experiment, and that's now in market, and that gave them the confidence to kind of go on and do it. If you've ever bought insurance, you probably think it's a bit of a tax on life, because it is dull, boring, bland, painful, unnecessary. You know, the insurance companies are greedy, all that kind of stuff. So when we were looking at that kind of challenge for more than thinking about, as Steph said, not Steph, Internet of Things, Suzanne, then you tie those two things together and you start thinking, okay, maybe we could do something a bit different. So does anyone know what these are? You're all smart asses, so you got those other ones quickly, but this is not technology. Oh, go on. They are fire insurance signs or plaques, yeah. So they are little, there we go. Australia, you're welcome, thank you. So their function was to sit on a building, right, and prove that that building was insured. Now that was important because the fire brigades were run by the insurance companies, right? So when a plume of... Exactly. So the plume of smoke would go up across London, right, and all these different fire brigades would come rushing to see whose job it was, and if you weren't insured by any of them, they'd all sod off and go home. Or they'd probably just protect the buildings that were insured by them nearby. But, you know, the insurance company who was responsible for the property stayed and put the fire out, right? Now that was proper insurance, right? That's trying to actually protect your assets. Protection, not even insurance. So it's trying to save and keep your things safe, because that's what you really want. You don't really want your house to burn down or your pet to die or whatever, or your car to crash or whatever it is, right? So we looked at that and thought about the technology side of it and thought, natural place to go is dogs, right? So who owns a dog? In the audience must be at least one. Oh, one. Excellent. Good. So we had an idea about dogs. Tell me if we like this idea. We thought, well, I wonder if we could sort of invert the model and do something a bit crazy, and that's give people free insurance, because we're an insurance company, but try and sell them and make money off something they actually want, right? Sound all right? Okay, okay, yeah. We know what we think of research. So we came up with this hypothesis quite quickly, which is, I'll tell you what, let's make it a subscription service. It gives you everything you need to feed, I was going to say clothe your dog. You don't need to clothe your dog. So all the food, all the worming tablets, we had a couple of new dog bowls. I think you had dog bowl every month, about 4 collars a year. You got some toys, you got some flea treatments and stuff like that. We also gave you a GPS dog collar, so if your dog gets lost or stolen, you can track it, and essentially a Fitbit for dogs as well, so you can kind of track its fitness. And this is all stuff we thought people are interested in, right? So that was our idea. Okay, so how do we test that idea? How do we prove? So I can ask you, do you think that's all right? Would you be interested in that? Might. Depends how much it was. How big's your dog? About 50 quid a month. All the food, everything. Yeah, everything. Yeah, see? Right, customer, boom, right. However, we don't rely on opinions like that, right? So what we did instead is we printed a leaflet. Right, we took a leaflet outside to real dog owners walking their real dogs and at dog shows like this one. That's Alice, she works with me. She's even got a T-shirt on. So we don't have a business, we don't have anything at this point. We just have an idea or a hypothesis to test. We make a little website that just explains what it is. It's 3 pages, says this is what it is, this is how much it costs. Click here if you're interested. Done. So we give the leaflet out, we talk to people about it, we learn lots about how they manage their dog's existence, what they're worried about in the process, and then we sit back and we wait to see how many clicks we get on the website. Simple as that, right? And once we've got those clicks, then we say if you want to join us, if you want to be part of it, if you actually want to sign up, put your email address in, a level of commitment. And at that point we say, not ready yet, but you're now part of an exclusive group helping us develop this product, right? So it's classic lean startup stuff, but an experiment. So the reason that's really important, particularly in any tech solution, is if the technology is expensive and hard to choose, it's really important you get this idea right first. Because if we had bought 5,000 dog collars, that looked like that. That was the best GPS dog tracking technology on the market when we started the project. 6 months later, this thing came out, really cool product, bound to be bought by Google quite soon. But that's the reason you wait and get these things right, and then you go, right, now we need a technology solution. Now let's find that, pick it, design it. So I did think, as a sort of kind of closing down this bit, if I knew then what I know now, what would I have done differently? So when I faced design decisions, or I faced those crazy ideas in the past, what would I have done differently if I had this mindset? Now, these stories are completely not true, right? They're based on real events. I've changed every single participant's name in the process, right? So I cannot get sued, I hope. But I will tell you real stories. Right, so imagine a luxury retailer, right? So I've used Harrods just as an example, right? Remember, they're all fictional. This is their checkout page. So I've put in my basket a 10,000 pound bottle of whiskey, obviously. Got it for Stuart's 10-year anniversary. It's got £5.95 delivery on it, which is really annoying, but anyway. And I was working for a very well-known luxury retailer, and the boss came in, very charismatic guy, had a lot of sway, and said, we need to take PayPal. Right? It was in the middle of a project to redesign the website. And we went, PayPal, really? You're a luxury retailer? At that point, I think I knew 2 people who had a PayPal account, right? Had no idea, but he basically met a guy who worked for a guy who was big in eBay, and he said, you've got to take PayPal, it's the future. So we stopped the whole project, we looked at all the feasibility. It was like a month to implement, it was really hard, loads of testing. No one was really sure how the user flows would affect the kind of checkout process, etc., etc. And we ended up doing it, right? And I think precisely nobody used it for about 2 years, right? But anyway. So if I knew then what I know now, what would I have done differently? I would have done this. I would have gone, this is their actual current basket today, but I would have just put a little PayPal logo on the payment screen. And when someone clicked on it, it would pop up a little box that said, thanks for expressing interest in using PayPal. And then I would have found some way to kind of make sure we still close the deal for that customer. Like, we would have phoned them, or they can go back and just use the other payment methods. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't. But I just make sure that I presented that button to, say, 500 people, and they just see how many clicks we get. Because at that point, I would have known for a fact whether this was a valuable resource for users, right? Here's another one. So imagine a well-known high street retailer. I've used Next just as an example. And we were with the CEO of this company, very well-respected, very successful company. And he said, I've got an iPad for Christmas. He did actually get an iPad for Christmas that year. And he said, I want to use this sort of new interactive stuff, and I want to do zoomy stuff, and I want a really successful catalogue. I want it to be basically the UI for the new website. So I want to change it all, get rid of all these lists and filters and stuff, and I just want the spreads from the catalogue, the print catalogue, in this sort of interactive form, and that will be the new way that people will shop with us. And we were sat there just looking at each other like this guy was crazy. And because this is what he wanted to do with his website, which was already quite successful, and we thought we'd just trash it. So and we argued a bit, and we were really polite, but he's very persuasive, and we ended up doing sort of the early stage designs for that site, and they went on to redesign the whole site around this kind of concept. If I knew then what I knew now, I would have put a little link somewhere in the site, just says, this is the current view, how you browse product. Would you like to try a new one? It's sort of catalogue spread based or something to that effect. And when people clicked it, I'd say, thanks so much. Sorry, not available yet, but you've really helped us decide this is the right thing to do. I would have given them £5 off at checkout, say thank you, job done, right? I'd make sure that at least 1,000 or 2,000 people saw that message, and I'd see how many clicks I got. And that would be the first stage in saying, is this a good thing to do or not? Do people actually value this? The interesting thing is, Next actually then did go on to do that, made 782 million profit last year. So it wasn't such a crazy idea at all, because that was actually their story, and that is kind of how they do their site now. They do have a quite fundamentally different UI from others, and it seems to work, I guess. I don't know the detail, but respect to Lord Simon Wolfson for that one. Hands up if you've ever been to an HMV shop. Keep your hands in the air and put them down if you've never asked anyone in that shop advice about what music or film or TV to watch. If you've never asked. Okay, so those of you that have asked, keep your hands in the air. If you're over the age of 25, put your hands down. Really? Yeah. Over 25. Oh, put your hand down. Right, we're back to 0. Good, right. Not that you don't look young. You do look very young, but, you know, just proving a point. In 2006, HMV's chief executive went to the market. They're a public listed company. Said, we're going to do social networking, right? That's my timer up. And this was big because this thing called Facebook was starting, and that was quite popular. MySpace was massive, and music was really big in MySpace. Later that year, I sat in a briefing session where he said, well, we'd like to pitch something. We're basically going to do MySpace, but better. Now, what that means for you young people is sort of owning a whole massive community of music lovers and other kind of lovers of film and TV and what have you, and just really owning and developing and building and growing that community, right? So we thought that was a little bit crazy. What happened is we went on to lose the pitch, right? But anyway, but it was based on these 3 hypotheses. Now, we've already proven that number 1 is kind of, that's even in question. So do people trust our authority in recommending music? Because actually the people who were 16 to 18 at the time are all those people that put their hands down immediately, and the ones that are about my age or a bit younger, they're the ones that actually do have that vibe. But the target audience for this was not us at all. It was the younger generation. So even that was in question. The second hypothesis, people who buy music want to be part of a community, we had no idea. MySpace kind of proved it, so okay, we'll sort of go with that one. The third one, I've put it in red because it's the most uncertain, is people who like music and are community-minded will make HMV their preferred place to come for those things, right? So that's a really shaky one. So if I were to look at, so actually this is what happened first. So what happened was I spent about a year developing a site. It was a very good site. It's done by a very good and well-respected agency. I won't name check, but they did do a good job. They came up with some interesting and innovative stuff about recommendations and how you make connections, all sorts of things. HMV then tried to build that community. They started with 1,000 beta testers. They ran a beta for 5 months. And then they opened the site in September 2008, that should be. And it closed in 2009, right? We think they spent somewhere between 5 to 10 million on it. I've actually estimated it at 5, but it's probably a lot bigger because of all the marketing and advertising around it. So that was quite a lot of money to put at stake based on being really uncertain about these hypotheses, that these things had to be true for this to be successful. So, knowing now what I know now, what would I have done then? We did actually suggest this then, but they didn't buy it. What's the smallest thing we could have done in 2007 to find out if that was actually true? We would have started an HMV MySpace page, and we would have seen if we could grow an audience there. And if we could grow an audience and they did like our stuff, we would also learn a lot about what it was that made them tick, and we would own a relationship with them and be able to talk to them and nurture them as a potential audience. And then we would have seen, should we carry on doing this, or should we do something different, or can we take them somewhere else? Can we actually take them into our own community? Is that possible? But that would have been the kind of risk-averse way where we're using evidence and data all along the way to see whether this is the right thing to do, rather than blowing X million pounds on it. So I definitely did base those stories on fiction. The last 2 were actually true, but never mind. Yes, anyway. So I'll just tell you very quickly then how this does work in the real world. So the Parliamentary Digital Service we talked a little bit about earlier while Stuart was sorting the technology out. But they did want to try a new way of working that was much more collaborative. So we took them through a very brief process. So everything we do at Fluxx is time-boxed, just to kind of prove that you can do things at pace. So we took cross-functional teams. They worked out what they wanted to do, and then they started doing. And we had 2 work streams. We ran 15 experiments all together on 2 different products. We got them out on literally day 1. We pushed them out into the street. So this is a group of people who did have a researcher, but most of them had never met their customers, despite the fact that their customers are the people they sit next to on the tube every day and they share a dinner table with, right? But they had never thought of them as customers or spoken to them like customers. So we took them out on the street. Sorry, we went to LSE. Do apologise for that. And we got them to talk with people about their ideas and what they were thinking of and what they were planning. We even got them to do some prototype testing on the street and so on and so forth. So we're getting them embedded and immersed in those ways of working. I'll tell you about one feature that we got them to develop. So it's their idea, and their idea was basically very simple, which is the Parliament website's full of jargon, right? So you've got bills, you've got committees, standing things and sitting things and all sorts of stuff I don't understand, right? So the idea was very simple. It was essentially what this little movie shows, which is as you hover over something, it's underlined in a particular way. That indicates there's a definition available for it. A bit of JavaScript pops up the definition and tells you what it is, and that's it. You can turn it on or off if you don't like it, if you're like a real pro, like a politics student or something cool. Sorry, joke. But that's it. So in 2 days they prototyped it. Now what they would have done is they probably wouldn't have even got that far, because their process and the way that they would have approached it would have been sort of significantly different. So firstly would have been research, so both customers and stakeholders, because actually it's not as simple as you think, because who defines those terms? That's politically quite sensitive, right? So how do you define the word opposition when you're referring? Right? If you're the government, you might define it in one way. If you're the opposition, you might define it in another way, right? So these are contentious political things, potentially. So there's all sorts of questions about, okay, well, who writes them? Who signs off on them? How do we maintain them? What if something changes? How do we decide on new ones? Who does it? You know, all this stuff about how it's managed and maintained. And before you know it, you haven't got a simple bit of JavaScript. You've got a whole back-end system. You've got a process. You've got a team of people, everything, right? So we said, should we worry about that if anyone actually uses it? And that'll be our starting point. So what we got them to do instead was just a prototype. So tested with users, seems all right, seems to like it, the interaction works well. Okay, can we just stick it live on a bit of the Parliament website that gets a bit of traffic but not too much? And they did. So it stuck it in the news section. It ran for, it took about a week to get it there, because they had to work some little workarounds around their site deployment process. But anyway, but they got it in, snuck it in through the content management system, and it sat there for a couple of days. And it generated so much data about what people actually did with it. So did anyone use it? And the answer was consistently, pretty much every visit to the page looked up at least one definition. The most interesting one that came top, and this was just pre-referendum, was the word referendum. Yeah, I think we saw the result of that one. But that generated so much data that now we can start to deal with the problems, right? So now it's worth thinking about who manages it, who maintains it, what's the back-end system look like, how does that get updated? All that stuff is now relevant. And this was the way they described their experience. So they said, in the old way of doing things, we would have had about 200 hours of meetings to get to this stage, and we would have done nothing, over that period of time. But in the new way of doing it, we actually reached over 300,000 people online. We spoke to 50 people on the street. We did 15 experiments, and we had 10 hours of meetings. Sorry, they still have meetings. But that was kind of the change. So, for me, the future of HCID is these two things. We're going to move from design with insight to design with data. That's going to be a significant move. We are going to become the independent, objective arbiters of crazy. Right? That is going to be our role, to decide what is crazy and what is not, no matter how charismatic or important the person whose idea it was. We can tell them, I'm sorry, but it didn't work, right? And they will accept our idea, our statements, because they are facts. And that's all I had to say. Thank you very much.